Good evening. Welcome to the Salem Area Mass Transit District meeting for today, Thursday, June 25th, 2020. We're here at the Senator Hearing Room at Courthouse Square, as well as virtually. For those of us that are present, we are socially distancing of the appropriate amount of space. And for that reason, I'm going to take off my mask, and hopefully you can hear me a little bit better now. If others who feel comfortable with that, they may do that as well. So to begin our meeting, Ms. Galeazzi, could you please call the roll or note the attendance? You don't need to call it, sorry. Just note it. Thank you. Perfect. And then we'll go ahead and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I will lead that here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States, to the republic for which it stands, under God, indivisible, with justice for all. Next, our general manager will lead us in a safety moment.
So, in accordance with the governor's guidance, encourage all people in public spaces to wear their masks. Well, wash your hands. How about now? Can you hear me? All right. Let me repeat that. So in accordance with the governor's guidance, please wear your masks when you're in any public space, whether that's indoors or outdoors, as well as wash your hands. Those are the two best methods that individuals can do to help protect them, be safe. Also, wipe down high-touch areas as well, and practice caution when you're out in public and minimize it as much as possible, but when you must, wear your mask and wash your hands.
Okay. Thank you, General Manager. Next up are the announcements. I have two, the first of which is the agenda item 1.1, which was sent to board members today. It has the updated figures of the specific dollar amounts being requested for the purchase of two cutaway vehicles. We'll get to that later in the agenda, but just wanted to flag that addition was made to our agenda packet. And then also wanted to flag that since we are conducting this largely virtually, that if you're not speaking, please mute yourselves. It really helps with audio feedback, particularly as we're broadcasting this out on CCTV. Thank you. Next, I have the privilege of honoring one of our own, Doug Rogers. He, as you know, that attended the meeting last month, he has announced his resignation, and it's effective at the end of this month. So this is the last meeting that he'll be attending as a director on this board. Speaking just personally, it's been an honor to serve with you, Doug. We have a plaque here that we'll send to you. For now, unfortunately, you'll have to do with this visual representation that I'm holding up, but I just wanted to note that public service is really a thankless job, and that I just want to take a moment to say thank you. I don't know all the specifics of what you gave up to be able to serve, but that doesn't particularly matter. I just want to say thank you. So, Director Rogers, if you wanted to say something, you are, of course, welcome to say so now.
Oh, thank you. I didn't think of saying anything until a few minutes ago, so I jotted down a couple notes. But it's of course, a privilege to be on the board. I was honored to be on the board twice. And it's been a great amount of fun getting to know the people and trying to figure things out as people were trying to ask me, what's Cherriots all about? How does it work? I was trying to learn myself. And I learned very quickly getting a person from point A to point B takes a lot more than a bus driver. I mean, a lot of hands are all put in together to run a seamless transportation um, like Cherriots. And I really appreciate everyone involved. You all do a great job. I'm proud of you. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Director Rogers. We'll make sure that this plaque gets sent to you. And again, just thank you for your many years of service. And lucky for us, we get you for the rest of this meeting. So thank you for that as well. Next on our agenda is the time for public comment. Given the present circumstances, we've asked members of the public to submit public testimony to a specific email address, and Nick Forte actually did submit that. He is the Transportation and Infrastructure Chair. This information was forwarded along to us members of the board. I want to note that it has been entered into the record, and that I'm directing staff or asking staff to take a look at and see what we can do to be able to accommodate Mr. Forte's request that we engage in increased collaboration with the city to adapt to these new realities. So, Mr. Forte, thank you very much. Next up is the budget hearing. So I am going to call the budget hearing to order. As a reminder, this is when we adopt the next year's budget. Director Krebs, as Budget Committee Chair, would you like to make a presentation here?
Thank you. As Chair of the Budget Committee for the Salem Area Mass Transit District, I'm pleased to present to you with approved budget for the fiscal year 2020-21 with the Budget Committee's recommendation to adopt the budget. Thanks to both the elected members and the appointed citizen members of the Budget Committee for their service, the attention to detail and insight of all the members made the process productive and efficient. And I'd also like to thank the General Manager, Alan Pollock, and his great hardworking staff. And one of the things we did this year was finish in one session where, because we did put a little extra time in on that session. The district's fiscal year 21 budget includes appropriated funds of $63.1 million and unappropriated and reserve amounts of $31.6 million for a total of $94.7 million. This budget will allow for a typical service level in fiscal year 21. This will occur incrementally in accordance with local, state, and federal guidelines as the pandemic continues its course. The district's general fund budget at $39.6 million includes property tax revenues, fare revenue, and various state and federal grant sources. The general fund will provide approximately 205,066 annual vehicle revenue hours, an increase over last year. The Transportation Program Fund budget at $10.4 million includes state and federal grant funds and local contributions from the general fund. The Transportation Program Fund pays for services provided by the district other than Cherriots' local fixed route service. These services include the Cherriots paratransit service, regional service, Cherriots call center, trip choice, and mobility management. State and federal grant funds also provide $13.1 million capital projects fund. Major projects proposed for fiscal year 21 include vehicle replacements in fixed route, paratransit, and regional service. It also provides for comprehensive ITS solutions for the district's buses, new software implementation in finance and human resources, the South Salem Transit Center, and upgrades and replacement of Del Webb property and equipment. The fiscal year 21 budget allows the district to offer full years of service and has the resources to attain and maintain a quality workforce while the district collaborates with federal, state, and local partners to identify funding to support public transit and infrastructure and work towards more effective and efficient public transit services. It was a pleasure chairing the budget committee. I thank all the people that participated for their commitment and hard work. And with that, I will turn it back over to you, Chair Davidson.
Thank you, Director Krebs. Are there any questions about the budget? Okay, I do not see any questions, in which case, would someone like to make a motion?
Director
Excuse me,
Davidson.
that's right, we are in the budget hearing. So, are there any members of the public that would like to make public comment? Ms. Galeazzi, is it correct that we have not received public comment concerning the budget? Okay, we have not received submitted public testimony. With that, I will close the budget hearing, and we'll move on to the deliberation of the budget hearing, in which case, are there any questions about the budget as presented by Director Krebs and as included?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Please.
I think that you'll need to invite anybody present to enter any testimony before you deliberate on the budget.
Okay. Is anyone present that would like to submit testimony? Okay, I do not see anyone. With that, I think I will close the budget hearing. And are there any questions? Now, having asked that for the third time, I think it's safe to assume that there aren't any questions. With that,
I do have one.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Because I'm still sort of getting my feet wet with this. Could Director Pollack, General, help me understand when and how we make corrections to the budget? It seems like in such tumultuous times, it would behoove us to understand how that process is going to work.
I think I'm going to ask our CFO, Al McCoy, to answer that question.
Thank you, Alan. There's no simple, quick answer for you, Sadie, but I will tell you that there is a thick regulation book in my office for local budget law. So we go by those regulations, the ORCs, when we are going to make an amendment of any kind. And there are multiple scenarios with caveats to each one. So as you will see later on the agenda tonight, we are making a budget amendment to the FY20 budget. It falls within the parameters and it's cited in the memo, the sections that will allow the budget amendment to be made by resolution. If the amount or if the amount's over a certain percentage of a fund, or if you are adding a new fund or a new category that was not originally appropriated when the budget was adopted, then you would need to do what we call a supplemental budget, which is a little bit different process. It requires a budget hearing for that. And then we would amend the budget that way. But there is a very laid out process within the Oregon budget law that we follow. We're not allowed, of course, to expend outside or over any of the categories as they are adopted. And we adopt ours by fund. So we have 3 funds. And then within each fund, we adopt the totals by division. So that's our guideline in our budget. So one of the amendments today pertains to that. So we want to make sure that we have enough money in a particular division before the year closes. So we don't want to overspend. And another amendment in the same resolution is about adding resources. And there is a clause that says if you have an imminent emergency or an unforeseen grant is received, then you can amend the budget by resolution. So that in this case, we are bringing forth the funds that we received from COVID and the CARES Act to amend into the budget for this year. And then we already incorporated a portion of that for next year. But there are many scenarios and they're all laid out in the budget law. And I'd be happy to go into further detail or send you a little summary, maybe might be helpful. I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you. And then is there, I mean, aside from us engaging in sort of the exercise of amending the budget, the adoption of the initial budget is really when we expose it to the public and the budget committee, and we have kind of that more robust process. But as we amend it, even substantially, we don't have that same opportunity. So would it be the responsibility of the various board members to bring that information to maybe neighborhood associations, or just be able to represent it to the public if asked?
The supplemental budget that I mentioned earlier, if there's a certain percentage increase, I believe it's 10% of a fund or a new category that's being added in expenses or such, then that requires a public hearing, the supplemental budget, and you have to post a public ad in the newspaper and on our website. So that does get the public involved. By resolution, it doesn't normally require public hearing, but you're, of course, are free to disseminate the information. Yes, sure.
Thanks. That's all my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Carney. Are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to approve the budget?
I would like to move that the board adopt resolution 2020-02 for adoption of the approved budget for fiscal year 2020-21 in the amount of $94,681,706 and approve taxes at a rate of 0.7609 per 1,000 of assessed value for operating purposes in the general fund.
Okay, thank you, Director Krebs. We have a motion. Do I have a second? Director Bush?
I second that.
Okay, thank you, Director Bush. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, Ms. Galeazzi, could you please call the roll for a roll call vote?
Okay. Director Krebs,
Aye.
Director Nguyen,
Aye.
Director Carney,
Aye.
Director Richards, Director Richards, Director Bush,
Aye.
Director Rogers,
Aye.
President Davidson,
Aye. Could you call Director Richards' name one more time?
Director Charles Richards. Oh, his mute.
Ross, can you unmute him? Oh, okay.
If you could unmute yourself, Director Richards, and then state your vote.
Click the microphone in the bottom.
Aye.
Got it.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you very much. With the budget now adopted unanimously, we'll move on to the consent calendar. Are there any items on the consent calendar that any members of the board have issues with that would like to be deferred to later? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to approve the consent calendar? Director Bush, please.
I move that we accept the consent calendar.
I'd like
Okay,
to
we-
second that.
Thank you, Director Rogers. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Ms. Galeazzi, could you call the roll?
Director Nguyen,
Aye.
Director Carney,
Aye.
Director Richards,
Aye.
Director Bush,
Aye.
Director Rogers,
Aye.
Director Krebs,
Aye.
President Davidson.
Aye. Great, thank you very much. Next we'll move on to the action items, and the first is the approval of the purchase of regional buses. General Manager Pollock.
And I'll ask our maintenance manager, Greg Thompson, to present the staff report.
Thank you. So President Davidson and members of the board, good evening. My apologies for the recent changes to the memo. The original memo did not include the cost for our specialized logoing of our blue and gray striping that you see on the street, and the inclusion of the new vehicle privilege tax that is 0.5%. Tonight, I am asking that the board authorize the general manager to execute a contract with Creative Bus Sales for the purchase of 2 cutaway-style paratransit vehicles for the delivery of the Cherriots Regional Service for a not-to-exceed amount of $177,263. The Cherriots Regional Fleet consists of 11 lift-equipped vehicles of varying size and capacity. Regular replacement of these vehicles is necessary to ensure a safe, efficient, and reliable service. As part of the district's overall capital planning efforts, SAMTD staff is committed to ensuring our vehicles are replaced at a schedule consistent with industry best practices. The 2 vehicles scheduled to be replaced are approaching 9 years of age, which far exceeds the 5-year useful life benchmark set by the Federal Transit Administration, as well as the 8-year useful life benchmark set in SAMTD's Transit Asset Management Plan, or the TAM plan. The contract price is based upon a state of Oregon price agreement procured under procedures set by the Oregon Department of Transportation's Public Transit Division. In accordance with these procedures, SAMTD staff issued a formal competitive invitation to bid for medium-sized Category D vehicles. There were 3 responsive bids that were received, with Creative Bus Sales meeting all of our required specifications and was also the lowest cost. Pricing from each of the vendors is outlined in Table 1 in your memo. Funding for this proposed contract will be included in the capital projects budget of SAMTD's adopted fiscal year 2021 budget. Project costs are listed in Table 2 of your memo. The total price also includes a 7% contingency. So staff recommends that the board authorize the general manager to execute a contract with Creative Bus Sales for the purchase of 2 cutaway-style vehicles for Cherriots Regional Service for a not-to-exceed amount of $177,263. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions for Mr. Thompson? I have 2 questions. The first, at the top, Mr. Thompson, you mentioned a tax. Could you, it sounded like a unique tax to me. Could you describe it?
It was a tax that was implemented with the passage of House Bill 2017 that puts a tax on, they call it a privilege tax on any new vehicle that's imported and sold in the state of Oregon.
Oh, and that applies to including cutaways and, okay, I did not realize that.
Everything.
Okay,
It benefits us.
that's fair. And then the 7% contingency, could you help me understand what that contingency, in what circumstances that might be utilized?
That would be used to cover if there were in the minimal chance that something was missed that's not a cardinal change to the procurement, that there was an additional feature that needed to be added, if there was a additional camera on the camera recording system. It just covers small incrementals such as that, just to ensure that we don't go over our entire budget.
Got it. Thank you. Are there any other questions?
I have a question that is more operational than actual vehicle, so it might require somebody different to answer it. But that's given the social distancing that we are all trying to practice at the moment. How many passengers can we get on one of our regional cutaway buses?
It depends on the size, and really depends on the seat layout. If Sue Coffin might be able to answer that question better if she's here.
Mr. Trimble?
So she's not here. Director Carney, it does depend on the size of the vehicle. We have several different lengths and seating arrangements in vehicles. So the number is 4 to 6 presently, as it were, to maintain adequate physical distancing. So that's a very generalized number, but it really is contingent upon the seating configuration and the length and style of the cutaway bus.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, with that, is there a motion?
I move that the board authorize the general manager to execute a contract with Creative Bus Sales for the purchase of 2 cutaway style vehicles for Cherriots Reach Service for a not to exceed amount of $177,263.
Okay, thank you, Director Krebs. We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll be a second.
Thank you, Director Carney. With that, Ms. Galeazzi, could you read the roll?
Director Carney,
Aye.
Director Richards,
Aye.
Director Bush,
Aye.
Director Rogers,
Aye.
Director Krebs,
Aye.
President Davidson,
Aye.
Director Nguyen.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the general manager's work plan for fiscal year 2021.
Thank you. So in accordance with Board Policy 116, it's the board's responsibility for evaluating the general manager. As part of that process, this board has established a process where we develop an annual work plan that's used as the basis of the evaluation. But prior to that, last month, the board approved a 3-year strategic work plan, which is in your packet as Attachment A. And the purpose of the strategic work plan is to set out over 3 years major projects that the board wants the general manager to focus some time and attention to, as well as sometimes projects don't fit neatly into a 1-year fiscal year period, and there is overlap, so it helps spread that out and strategize on the order of of accomplishment of those projects. Supporting that 3-year plan is each year in May or in June, the board will approve an annual work plan. You may look at it kind of like when there's a strategic plan, you have an annual business plan that supports and identifies those projects and activities in the coming year that support that 3-year plan. And the proposed work plan for fiscal year 21 is in your packet, shown as attachment B. And that project, that work plan identifies the projects that support the strategic plan, has a description, and also describes the intent of what is intended to be accomplished in the upcoming fiscal year. And then at the end of fiscal year 21, this document will be used as the basis for, or one of a couple of documents for the evaluation of the general manager. So with that, I would ask that the board approve the fiscal year 21 general manager's annual work plan as shown in attachment B.
Thank you, General Manager Pollock. Are there any questions for General Manager Pollock about the specifics of the strategic plan and the work plan? Okay, I have one item that I'd like to change if the board agrees with me. A month ago today, George Floyd was senselessly killed, and his killing has unleashed a wave of frustration at and recognition of deeply rooted racism, which touches every aspect of society. And while a lot of the frustration and attention has been focused on policing, I think we need to recognize that public transit isn't somehow immune from systematic racism and prejudice. And with that, I think that we need to accelerate our timeline and modify the general manager's strategic plan as we approved last month. I think we need to accelerate the timetable and specifically move up the development of the agency diversity, equity, and inclusion plan for this upcoming fiscal year, what starts next week. So instead of waiting until the following fiscal year 22, as we had intended and previously approved, I would like to see us modify the strategic plan to move it up to fiscal year 21, which starts just here in a week. And so then that will reflect a prioritization that I think is needed in our agency and in the broader culture. So what to drill down on what I'm proposing that we modify the strategic plan that we approved last month and then approve the work plan reflecting that change as well. And so if the board agrees with my proposal to modify the strategic plan, we would then need to, in terms of a motion, we would also need to reflect that change in the work plan. So conceivably, it's one compounded motion or two separate motions. But with that proposal, I'm curious to hear what the board thinks and whether or not this proposal has legs.
President Davidson, this is Director Carney. I want to wholeheartedly endorse this proposal, and I might ask that the board also think about the relationship between climate change and equity, and the interplay there. I know that many of our most vulnerable communities in terms of climate change are also communities that have been traditionally disenfranchised through the processes that we're talking about, and sort of are exposed to the more systemic racism and other disparities within the systems and power structures that we have set up. So I don't know if it would make sense at this point or at a future point to align those two efforts, but they seem to me at least somewhat related, but I'm happy to hear others' thoughts in that regard.
Other thoughts or comments from the board?
I support the change. I think we need to be, there's a grassroots movement out there, and we need to be aware of it, and in my opinion, we have waited too long for this equity thing to occur, and we need to be taking action so that we are at least doing it within our organization.
Thank you, Director Krebs. Others? And please don't feel like you have to speak. If someone would like to make a motion, we can also do that as well.
Director Bashir. I support the attention that we need to pay to this issue and bringing that diversity, equity, and inclusion plan to the forefront. That will help us do some realigning. Some of that we do already through our Title VI program. That's an extensive program that it reaches out into many areas. And I do know that this will help that. And then as we're getting our the electric buses that we just were awarded, that's being understanding that it will be on Route 11, which is one of our highest used routes, and in that area that is affected by Title VI as well. So I think we're on the road, no pun intended, but we're heading in the here comes another one. We're heading in the right direction. So
thank you, Director Bush.
Director Rogers here. I don't know if you can see me waving.
I don't see you waving, but please go ahead.
Has anyone accused Cherriots of doing something underhanded or wrong in any of this? I mean, I thought we were hiring the best people we could, regardless of who they were. And I'd never say you can't hire. I would never want it to be said somebody was not hired because of pigmentation of their skin or anything like that. But has anyone accused us of doing something like that?
I'm not aware of that, and the proposal that I'm making isn't reactive to a claim that I'm aware of specific to discrimination within the Cherriots workplace. That's not to say that it doesn't occur. I'm simply unaware of it. I think that we have an opportunity to improve. I think that this will, there's always room for growth, particularly on an issue of as important or as deeply set as systemic racism. I think it's often felt differently to different people. I know, speaking personally as a white male, I have not experienced systemic racism to the same degree as someone else. I think that goes without saying. So it's hard for me to articulate what that experience might be like for someone else. But I do know that there is systemic racism and that there is opportunity for us as an organization, as both employer and as a public agency serving community members to improve. And I think the diversity, equity, and inclusion plan will allow us to firmly articulate what those values are that we hold and how we execute those values. But those are just my initial thoughts. General Manager?
If I could say something to answer your question, Director Rogers, no. I think what I'm hearing is really it's making sure, and I believe the organization practices that everything we do is really under the guise of respect for all, and that what we can do is improve. There's always room for improvement. And, for example, one of the things that we can do is be a little bit more intentional in promoting how we incorporate equity into our service planning decision. Sometimes we're too close and we know we're doing it, but maybe we're not communicating it. So that's an opportunity for us to share. And as we go through service planning decisions, making sure we're more intentional in our outreach to community members or hearing from all members of the community. So I think it's an opportunity, from what I'm hearing, is really for us to take a step back, reinforce the good things we're doing, but look for ways to improve those. And if there's other things we can do, how do we incorporate that so that we are seen as an inclusive and equitable service to the community?
Thank you, General Manager
President
Pollock.
Davidson?
Please, Director Nguyen.
Yes, couldn't echo more with my colleagues that this very much is a move to be proactive and that we're ensuring that Chariot continues to deliver a world-class customer experience for everybody that uses public transit. But really, by the creation of the DEI plan and pushing this up and prioritizing it to take effect fiscal year 21, it ensures that Team Cherriots reflects its community and ensures equitable, like the general manager said, equitable service to the community. And that includes, the way we go about procuring, choosing vendors. It goes about how we choose to promote within staff ranks, as well as also any disparate impacts that clearly Director Bush had highlighted. We have a baseline to work off of in the Title VI report. We know there's improvements that need to be made, and we can use that tool to circle back once the DEI plan has been implemented to see if we were able to address ensuring that the best democracy is representative democracy. So thank you. And with that, I'd like to move that the general manager's work plan be adopted with the change of moving the DEI plan up to fiscal year 21. And I am doing it on the fly, so I apologize if that was not on script.
That was perfect. Could you also, in your motion, modify the strategic plan that we approved last month to incorporate the change as well, to reflect the change?
Yes, I will. My motion will also include what you just mentioned, moving up the strategic plan.
Perfect.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Director Carney. Ms. Galeazzi, could you do a roll call vote?
Director Richards.
Aye.
Director Bush.
Aye.
Director Rogers.
Aye.
Director Krebs.
Aye.
President Davidson.
Aye.
Director Nguyen.
Aye.
Director Carney.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. With that approved, on a similar note, I wanted to use one of my privileges as board president, but before that, I wanted to set the stage a little bit. So with this action, I think we're taking a proactive step to really prioritize something that needed prioritization, the creation of a diversity, equity, and inclusion plan. With that, though, I think we need to go in clear-eyed, understanding that we alone will not be able to solve something so systemic that it's it's been around for 400 years. But as community leaders, we have a responsibility to speak out, to be visible, and to, most importantly, to act. And we have to ensure that everybody has access to safe transportation, and particularly our transportation services. And we have to ensure that the community members in our community feel safe and welcome every time they ride in one of our vehicles or visit one of our properties. This has to be real and transparent, and it has to be more than just words, because we've heard a lot of those recently. This has to be backed up with action. So effective immediately, I am creating the Board Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. This body will assist General Manager Pollock in developing the comprehensive diversity, equity, and inclusion plan for our agency. They will have wide latitude to evaluate all aspects of Cherriot's business to determine areas for change and improvement. I've asked Director Nguyen to chair this committee. Director Wynn.
Thank you, David. President Davidson. As President Davidson said, anyone can make a statement, but now's the time to take bold action. We really need to start having those difficult conversations as we navigate this effort. We know we're going to stumble. We're going to struggle to identify the right words and ask the right questions. I'm humbled and honored to lead the effort on behalf of Cherriots. I'm proud of the commitments of this board and the staff. During our earlier board retreat, we hadn't planned for the DEI work to commence until fiscal year 21, but really it's the response in this moment and current events that we're shifting the DEI work up to this fiscal year beginning next week, July 1. Every level of our organization, staff and board alike, we are committed to treating our customers and our employees with courtesy and respect, striving to be in community with one another. I'd like to celebrate something that's noteworthy. In the 3 budget cycles that I've been able to serve, we've produced a tool that communicates our values. The budget committee members have always asked follow-up questions to ensure that any security vendor we consider has values that align with our own and strives to maintain a peaceful environment for all users of the public transit system. Unlike other transit districts, Cherriot relies on a private peacekeeping provider whose employees are trained in de-escalation techniques and are unarmed. Again, anyone can speak in the moment, but without strategic, deliverable actions, the plan only exists on paper. We all have blind spots. Without the visibility and public scrutiny of the most impacted by the injustices, staff and board would not be aware of such disparate impacts. I recognize that sitting here before you in the composition of this body. There's certainly a lot of faces that are missing, voices that have not felt like they've been heard or felt welcomed here. It's our job to figure out what those shortcomings are to ensure that those voices are lifted up. I look forward to being able to do this through our DEI committee. We will approach this effort with great humility, compassion, and understanding. Lastly, if I may, I'd like to affirm on behalf of the board that we support the peaceful assembly and protests happening in our community. People are taking highly visible action that can't be dismissed, ignored, or disregarded. Turning words into action is the only way for us to drive change. Thank you for making this bold change tonight.
Thank you, Director Wynn. As with all board committees, regular reports will be made to the full board on the progress of this board, and I look forward to ultimately seeing this full report come to fruition over the next year. So thank you. Next on the agenda are the ridership reports for March, April, May.
Great, thank you. I'd like to ask our service planning manager, Chris French, to please make the report.
Good evening, President Davidson, members of the board. Here this evening to kind of give you guys an update on ridership with the board or the quarterly report that I gave last board meeting. Kind of talked about where numbers were. And so we wanted to come back and kind of update you with the things that have been happening with COVID and limited space on the bus and decreased service and the stay-at-home order. You can see in April that ridership dropped off significantly with total ridership for the local system, only 27,000 approximate people rode the bus, and that's a 91% decrease over the previous year. And we saw similar results for the regional system and also Cherriots Lift with going to life-sustaining trips during the time that we were shut down, and then also people kind of following that order of stay at home. As we moved into May, we started to see some of the orders change and going into phase 2, and we started of reopening the economy. We started to see an uptick, and we also made some service adjustments so that we could maintain productive service where we weren't leaving people behind at stops because of the limited capacity on the bus. So as we move forward, we've been trying to adjust and stay ahead of that overcrowding on the bus with such a limited amount of people being able to ride the bus. So in May on the local system, we saw total ridership about double from the previous month. And as we see and work through the opening and the future months with COVID-19, and as we adjust, we will probably continue to see an increased ridership. The average daily ridership, preliminary looking at June through the 24th, it looks like our average weekday ridership is about 3,500. So that does show a slight uptick in people riding the bus and being out there. On July 12th, we are increasing service again, bringing back some more service so that we can try to minimize people having to wait longer than expected and provide service that's reliable to the people out in the community. And with that kind of is an overview of where we're at, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Are there any questions for Mr. French?
I have one. Can you hear me okay? I had to change computers here. Okay. My question is about the service adjustments that you have made in order to prevent people from waiting. I'm just curious, kind of on the ground, what that looks like. Are we sending more buses on routes and adjusting sort of service in that way, or?
Yes, so we basically how we've been we've been addressing it a few ways. We have, because we've had fewer buses on the road, we have operators that we've actually been staging throughout town to be able to fill in when the buses are full. So in places that we kind of know, we've been having buses out in the system. People have probably seen them out there. They'll be sitting in a pole out through town and say out of service, and that's just so that we can fill in. What we've also been doing is we've been increasing the frequency on the routes, especially on the core network. That's where a lot of our ridership comes from, and that's where most of the shopping and and doctors' offices and those kind of facilities are located. So as we're looking at ridership and where we're getting those calls for over full buses, it's been on the core network. So from when we went to our full reduction, or the least amount of service in April that we had on the road, we've increased that core network. We went to half-hour headways on it, and in July we're getting ready to go to 15-minute headways on most of that core network to help provide more space for people to ride the bus with limited capacity.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? I have one, Mr. French. So with July 12th and the increase in additional service, I know we're operating at, if I'm remembering correctly, about 58% of normal weekday service. What will the July 12th change allow us to operate at?
Yes, so for the weekday service, we will be at about 80% of our weekday service. And for Saturdays, we're bringing it back to 100% of Saturday service to help maintain that or help with the overcrowding on the buses. So we'll be at 80%. That is bringing back, we've expanded the evening hours going to 9 o'clock. With that change, we haven't added any earlier service at this point, and we're starting 15-minute service on the core network at 8 o'clock and going till 7 p.m. So that covers that. And then Saturdays will be our regular service that we currently run on Saturdays, or we were running on Saturdays prior to COVID-19, to be clear, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. French. Other questions? Okay, thank you again, Mr. French. Next on the agenda is the general manager's report.
Right, thank you. Just have a few items. First off, since our last meeting, we have received thank you cards and thank you letters from Saniam Hospital as well as Salem Health. Early on, we donated supplies to both hospitals to help them in the early stages of the pandemic, and they have said thank you. Thought it'd be important for the board to know that that has happened. Just a reminder, earlier this month, I did send everyone some tips for better virtual board meetings. We did a little bit better today, and we'll just keep improving each month, but this might be a good refresher to read before each board meeting so we can get the process down. It'll make it a much more efficient meeting. Let's see. Let me talk about state legislation. So as you know, yesterday began a special legislative session. Earlier today, there was a hearing on Senate Bill 1601, which relates to transportation, and two items of importance for transit. One is some clarity in the language consolidating the Special Transportation Fund and the Special Transportation Improvement Fund, which was something that was attempted to get fixed in the last session, but we ran out of time when we were unable to meet. I should back up. So earlier this week, these items were not on the special session calendar. Thanks to efforts of the Oregon Transit Association and our advocacy groups at Oregon Transit Association as well as Cherriots, we were able to get these on the agenda. And so the hearing was this morning. Also on that was the request for flexibility in the statewide transportation improvement funds to allow us to maintain service, even if we needed to use that money if it wasn't for enhanced services. Ken, I got a report from Dale Penn, who's our advocate at the state. So just let me read his comments. So at 6:06 p.m. tonight, the Joint Committee on the first special session of 2020 moved our bill SB 1601 with -2 amendments out of committee with unanimous support. It'll be on the Senate and House floor tomorrow, and Senator Liebeyer and Representative Susan McLean will carry it. So that's good news. We'll be monitoring to make sure it goes through, and once it goes through there, the governor should sign it, and that allows us some flexibility so we don't have to have money in the bank but not be able to provide service, as well as it allows us to move through the process of consolidating the two funds, which I believe the actual effective date when they become one would be July 1st of 2023, but I'll have to double check the final language. At the federal level, you've seen in my email distribution to you that the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee did pass the transportation bill, has been merged into HR2, which becomes a true infrastructure bill. We're awaiting its vote on the House floor, and then there'll be the usual conference committee work. Hopefully, at some point this year, we will have a new transportation bill. We'll follow the progress as it goes through. I can tell you, in my role on the APTA Legislative Steering Committee, we met earlier this week to talk about, while we fully and strongly support the bill, there's a few technical cleanup items, especially around mobility and mobility on demand, as well as a few other items. But that's the main one we need to make sure we get fixed so we can use our federal money to support those programs. Also, I think I've sent you, so as a result of the pandemic, all APTA conferences have been canceled for the year, which includes the annual meeting in the fall, and that's been moved to next spring, assuming everything goes well between now and then. And then the last item I'd just like to close, I have sent the board, I sent you an email informing you of this, but I would like to state that on June 18th, transit operator Michael Madison passed away after a long illness. He was a transit operator for many years, always had a smile on his face. His wife, Karen, who he met here, is also a transit operator. I talked with her earlier this week, and she supported the request I'm about to make. And so President Davidson, with your permission, I'd like to request that you close tonight's meeting in honor of and in remembrance of Michael Madison.
Absolutely.
That concludes my report.
Thank you. Next up are the Board of Director reports. Board members, I turn your attention to, in our packet, page 45. You'll note that this memo format is slightly different. This is an attempt to change things up a little. So here we can go down the line of subdistrict by subdistrict, and each board member has an opportunity to report out on items that they think are of significance to the board, whether those are external committees they serve on or other work. So with that, Subdistrict 1, Director Nguyen.
Nothing to report, thank you.
Thank you. Subdistrict 2, Director Bush.
I show that I represent the Citizens Advisory Committee, which did not meet this month, but we will be meeting next month. And I have been attending several transportation webinars and other things in the community to try and keep Cherriots in front of everybody. It's been pretty fun.
Great. Thank you, Director Bush. Director Carney.
Thank you. Yes, I attended the SCATS meeting earlier this week on the 23rd, and they updated the SCATS Transportation Improvement Plan. They amended it to include the U.S. Department of Transportation award to Cherriots for low and no emission vehicle program of $3,573,581. And so there was kind of a general hurrah for that, because I know that that group had offered their support. And I think Chair Clark, the mayor of Kaiser, noted that the city of Kaiser submitted a letter of support in that fund request. So everyone was happy to see that. And then I would also note that Mike Jaffe, who works for the Council of Governments, that supports the SCATS Policy Committee, pointed out that there are state agencies, I think it's 4 state agencies. I should know this because the state agency I work for is one of them. But it's not a project that I myself am involved in. But it's a plan. There's a website that's hosted through ODOT called Every Mile Counts, that is part of a four agency effort at updating our statewide transportation strategy. And so the policy committee was advised to sort of keep their eyes on this project as it moves forward. And there is some nexus to the work that is happening at the Land Conservation and Development Commission, which is the commission that oversees the work for the state agency I'm employed with, in relationship to the governor's executive order 20-04 that comes out of her carbon office. And that asks that state agencies do or present to the governor different ways that are within the power that state agency has to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to meet our reduced targets. And so that's all in front of the policy committee, and also work that I'm kind of familiar with for other reasons. And so I will keep our board informed on that as the policy committee moves forward in their discussion of it.
Thank you, Director Carney. Director Rogers, your very last board report, if you'd like to make one.
Yes, well, our neighborhood association did meet, but so few people showed up, we did not have a quorum. But I still reiterated to them that I was resigning and to put feelers out in the community. And I'm really hoping that there'll be a nice pool of people who will step up and say, hey, I want to be a part of Cherriots. And I am thankful for having been a part of Cherriots. I want to I don't think there's one time that I can remember where the board did not get along while we were trying to work things out. And I really appreciate that kind of quality members to a board. Because I know, like all of us, we have very differing opinions on many things. Yet, we can smile and say hello and still work together. And that's been a real blessing. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Rogers. For my report, for the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments, they, like us, just approved their budget, and then they're continuing their executive director search. I'll have further details as that search progresses. As you might imagine, the global pandemic threw a wrench in some of that. So more news forthcoming. For the Mid-Willamette Valley Area Commission on Transportation, multiple items were discussed, but the one I wanted to highlight is ODOT's budget outlook. There's details. We've received an email from ODOT now been several weeks ago about the financial outlook for the agency. At this point, it doesn't appear to impact public transit. This is in and of itself not looking at the bigger macro issues of a pandemic, but there's some opportunities for improvement as they portray it to fix some of these structural budgetary issues. So anyways, just wanted to flag that. If you have additional interest in learning more, I would refer you to the email that ODOT sent to us several weeks ago. And then I just wanted to plug in a little reminder for if there's interest from the board in developing a set of almost like an agenda, like how we do with a legislative agenda of core principles that we support. I think it could help us as a board navigate as we serve on these external committees. So if there is interest in developing something like that, so for example, on MWAC, there's discussion of prioritization of projects. So in that capacity, I represent the board, but I don't necessarily have clear direction on how the board feels about a particular project versus another. So I, of course, can make a personal judgment call, but I think we'd be in a better situation if we as a board came together and put together overarching principles that allow us to then speak confidently to how the board feels, because when we serve in these external committees, we're representing the board, not just ourselves. So anyways, I sent an email about it maybe a couple weeks ago. At this point, time seems very elusive, so I'm not sure when I sent it. But so if there is interest, please send an email to General Manager Pollock, and then we can put that together and develop something, and then at a future board meeting, we can hopefully discuss and approve something like that. With that, I'll conclude my report. Director Krebs, Subdistrict 6.
Well, I've attended neighborhood meeting. We're actually holding our neighborhood meeting on Zoom, so at least one of my neighborhood is still meeting. I also attended the OMPOC meeting. That's the Oregon Metropolitan Planning Organization Consortium, and that was held June 1st. Several of the issues that you brought up and Director Carney brought up were discussed. OMPOC is also adjusting their bylaws. Major changes that the leadership now is going to be passed around in OMPOC, and they want the leadership to pass around to the various organizations so that it isn't just dominated by the big MPOs. There was talk about the ODOT problem, funding problem. One of the things at OMPOC, we hear from all the transit agencies around the state, and looks like we're all in the same boat. In fact, we may be in better shape than our neighbors to the north and south, because we do have the property tax levy, and with the unemployment problems, the payroll tax has taken a pretty big hit. Actually, LTD to the south is running token service on weekdays, and they're not running any Sunday service, so they're just like we are. And the other things that came up during the meeting dealt with the Portland Metro, which is the MPO for the Portland region. And Portland Metro has had a big impact on their funding because a lot of their funding comes from user fees like the zoo, the convention center, and the expo center. And they have laid off a major, they're talking about $11 million loss per month for Metro. And so they have looking at a 20% reduction in their budget for next year. And the metro area is also passing or going to put a ballot measure out that's going to be $4 billion over 20 years to pay for transportation improvements in the metro area. And with that, I think that's my report.
Thank you, Director Krebs. Director Richards, do you have anything that you'd like to report?
Yes, I do. I've been housebound now since December 13th, and it's been a very different situation for me. But talking to the neighborhood groups around my area, it's worked out very well because now I have a group of people who are, whenever they have communication problems about what is going on with Cherriots, they call me and ask me for the numbers that they're going to send to. And it's been real interesting. And I've got some new friends out here that are really, the kind of people that you like to be around. So it's going to be nice to go back. I have another life. I live at the Air Museum too, and the Air Museum is going to be open on Monday, and it'll be my first time back since December. So I'm very excited about that. But I thank you guys all for being very nice to me when I make boo-boos, but I'm learning. It is beginning to get it, and it is really a different world that some of us come from. I spent a lot of time at the Capitol for the last 9 years, and hearing you talk about the Capitol and not being able to get there and not agreeing with everyone, it still is as you say, you smile and adjust, and we take care of each other, and that's what I plan to do. So thank you very much, and I'll see if I can do more for you now.
Thank you, Director Richards. Are there any other comments or notices that anyone would like to make?
I have a question.
Director Bush.
I was just wondering if we could maybe explain a little bit the process of choosing another board member to the public, since Director Rogers is it's his last meeting, and I want to honor him by saying thank you for your service. As a friend and colleague, I think you have held your position with the highest honor.
General Manager Pollock.
So as far as recruitment for the replacement for Director Rogers, that has been underway for quite some time. There are some applicants who are interested and have submitted their application to the governor's office. So it's really in the governor's hands right now. So there is a selection process that the governor's staff goes through, and at some point people get interviewed and they make the selection, and that person will go, the plan as it stands now will go in front of the Senate for Senate confirmation during the September legislative days. And if that goes through and is approved, they'll be able to start participating as a board member in October. Really, it's at the state level now since it's a governor appointed.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you very much. Our next board meeting will be July 23rd, 2020. And with that, I'd like to close tonight's meeting in honor of and in remembrance of Michael Madison.
Thank you.